Okay, so the sixth lie is one that I think can be very easily misunderstood or honestly missed completely, and it's around the topic of intimacy. And I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but the lie that you address is the imitation intimacy. So what is that? Talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you ask, teenagers, young adults, what is the first thing? What's the first word that comes to your mind when you say intimacy? And probably 90% of people are going to say sex.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? Sex is not intimacy of its in its own. Like sex, like there is intimacy involved in sex, but sex in itself is not intimacy. Intimacy is found in the presence of God. We see when there's creation, like God created us to desire him. When we and then if we distort what intimacy actually is, it's actually proximity to our creator. And when we look at marriage as what it actually is, it's a representation between Christ and his bride. It's not to fill my desires. It's not to, live out these sexual fantasies. It's not to dissipate my desire to do this. If we just really stop and understand, man, there's something better that's available to us, but it's not that. And it is, again, it just like goes back to counterfeits time and time again.
Yep.
It's like, man, the enemy really wants us to just like, well, if you would just take this thing that God has designed that's really good, if I can just distort it just a little bit, if I'm 5 degrees off, then I can take you to a place where you never thought you would end up
Yep.
doing things you never thought you would do.
Yeah, I think that it really does explain why a lot of people feel like when they're single, they look at marriage as kind of the solution of, well, when I'm married, I won't struggle or have these same struggles because they feel like sex and intimacy go together and I'm going to have what I'm looking for. And then they're married and they're having a physical relationship with their spouse, but they're not truly, as you're bringing up, Joshua, they're not truly experiencing intimacy. They're having some physical closeness. They're maybe having a piece of what intimacy is, but they're not truly being known. They're not truly being loved for who they really are. They're still perhaps wearing masks or trying to find fulfillment through pleasure. And it's never, as you brought up so well, it's never enough. And so there's an emptiness that comes, I think, even deeper in marriage. I mean, that's the thing that I would say to single people that sometimes they miss. They think, oh, well, married people have it so easy because, they've got this depth of connection with their spouse, and so they don't struggle like I do. But the truth is, I think a lot of people in marriage that are struggling with pornography or lust, they actually feel a deeper sense maybe of shame or worthlessness or regret because there's this feeling of, well, I'm having the sex, what I've called intimacy, and it's not enough. Why isn't it enough? What's wrong with me? And then they're kind of stuck in that place when they don't see, well, you're only getting a piece of what God calls us to in intimacy. And so if we can unpack the full version of intimacy before Christ and that knowing and being known and being loved for who we are, that's really a game changer, I think, in our recovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's impossible for us to desire, or it's impossible for us to satisfy our heart by using our flesh.
Hmm.
It'll never work. You'll never mitigate an internal problem exclusively with an external solution.
Yeah.
That's good.
It'll never work.
Put that on Twitter,
Yeah,
X, or
tweet
whatever
it.
it's
We'll
called.
put it on a t-shirt. We'll
Whatever we
put it
call
on a
that now.
mug, whatever.